Всім добрий вечір.
On behalf of the brave.
On behalf of every father and every mother.
Wings for freedom. On behalf of our warriors.
And paves the way for a new history.
Good evening and welcome to a new episode of Tochnyi Talks. This is a series where we do interviews and short talks, sometimes spontaneous streams, but this time we planned an interview with some of the people, or one of the people behind the Wild Hornets. So welcome Alex Roslin and welcome Daniele.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
We are super excited to to have you on the stream. Daniele, as you may know, he's obsessed with FPV drones, and he's a big fan, and I am as well.
Well, thank you so much for all the work you've been doing. It means everything to Ukrainians to have the support of people such as yourselves. It's everything. It's our cornerstone of our victory.
Thank you. We're trying as best as we can to bring accurate information out there, and we're doing so in basically three various domains. We're using, of course, we started off with Twitter, but we've gone multi-platform, so we're also transmitting mainly live on YouTube and also live on Twitter at the same time. But if you are in the YouTube chat, then please try and give us some questions or comments. We're trying to answer your questions as we go along. Probably we're going to try and do most of them at the end, and we'll try to answer them to the best of our ability. We also publish some articles on our website, Tochnyi.info. Daniele has published the latest article on FPV drone warfare, and that's why we basically are here today. So I think I'm gonna start off asking you, Alex, what are the Wild Hornets, and why did you start the Wild Hornets?
Well, I should clarify. I didn't start the Wild Hornets. I'm a journalist in Canada. I'm of Ukrainian descent, and but I've been supporting Ukraine since for many years, obviously, and especially since the full-scale war started. And so I found out about the Wild Hornets by reading an article about them in CensorNet, which is one of the better-known Ukrainian news websites. It's run by a very well-known Ukrainian military reporter and anti-corruption activist, Yuri Butusov. And so we were approached by a lot of different drone outfits for support, but they decided to support the Wild Hornets, particularly after researching them a little bit and finding out how effective these FPV drones are. And so they chose them as their only FPV drone for dedicated fundraising support. And started fundraising for them last May and June, and wrote an article. One of their journalists went to just see how they work and watch their testing of their drones, and wrote an article which I saw, and I was so impressed by them. I wrote an article about them as well in the Kyiv Post, and then kept my contacts with them, and quickly started wanting to fundraise for them, and just devoted all my fundraising and a lot of work that I do on Twitter and elsewhere toward supporting them, because I could see how effective they are, how cost effective, for example, how high performing they are, and really now, of course, filling the ammunition gaps left by the the blocking of critical U.S. aid to Ukraine by Putin's friends in the U.S. Congress. So I became a volunteer with them. The team is actually in Kyiv. That's where all the drones are built, in the Kyiv area. But there's a very quickly growing group of volunteers and supporters and donors all around the world, including on Twitter, who I'm very proud to say have joined us and are just so enthusiastic in helping. And we've had various raffles and other kinds of fundraisers for several months now, and so it's exciting to see how that's evolved and grown.
Thank you. So to clarify, the Wild Hornets it was founded in Ukraine, or has it some sort of Canadian-Ukrainian kind of connection from the beginning?
No, there was no Canadian connection really, apart from just me, my and many other Ukrainian Canadians, and just other Canadians who aren't of Ukrainian descent, just believing Ukraine, supporting Ukraine, and I have a very enthusiastic and strongly supporting Ukrainian Canadian family and community who have themselves, just that one small group of people has contributed up to maybe $25,000 US since in the last 6 or 7 months to Wild Hornets. But apart from that, the team is all in Ukraine. It started with some humanitarian volunteers who had connections with with Ukrainian anti-tank unit, actually, that saw the potential for these drones in the Okrema Prezidentska Brigada, the Ukrainian separate presidential brigade, which is an elite sort of, I don't think they're officially special forces, but they're a very elite brigade. And so their troopers saw the potential last year, about a year ago, for FPV drones. And so they worked with these volunteers to develop some of the first FPV drones that could also be used as bombers. So they have this very versatile multi-role functionality. So they can be reused over and over again in the bomber capacity, or smashed into some enemy equipment in the kamikaze kind of capacity. And so very closely collaborating together to develop more and better drones, and the drones were built they are built and they since the beginning in Ukraine out of parts, so that there'd be a little bit less reliance on an actually ready-made Chinese or otherwise FPV drone. And the Ukrainian team has very highly skilled technicians who work closely with military personnel to develop, to choose the highest quality parts and continually innovate them to make them more and more effective.
Yeah, I would like to come back to the development and also the production a little bit later, but I wanted to bring Daniele a little bit into the conversation. And so, Daniele, what was it that caught your eye with Wild Hornets in particular? Because me and you and many other in Tochnyi have been talking a lot about FPV drones and what we think Ukraine should do with FPV drones, etc. And then you've been talking a lot about these guys.
Okay, yeah, I think one of the things that I was really impressed since the beginning was the level of integration, so the quality of the integration. So you can see different type of kits that have been delivered to soldiers, both sides, and they are most of the time needing a lot of self-assembly, and always the cable management is always not exactly ideal. It's not the same for each drone. And what you can see here is a consistency path, a consistency in the assembly, in the way on how parts are constructed. And this for the little experience that I have in terms of system engineering, this was a good sign, because it was a sign that, okay, here behind there is a project, there is a plan, there is a set of people that upgrade and probably take track of each component that goes in, and then when they have to update it, they know exactly what to do. It's not a volunteer job. It's not like a bunch of amateurs that are trying to do such job. So, and the other point was the fact that I start to see different model, like the 7-inch, the 10-inch, and then the different variant, the bomber, the the bomber with the rotating carousel, which is neat, honestly, and then the night vision thing, the night vision drone, and all these things. Then this image was significant, because in behind you see those kind of shell. Those are 3D printed and are designed. I know other people involved in these, or for other from other routes, in particular for wild bees, which are volunteer and normally try to deliver such ammunition, that, but mostly for dropped drop bombing. So essentially the drones, the surveillance drone that drop a grenade. And this was a clear sign that a lot of work has been put behind. That it was not just a one-shot work. It was a very well sustained work. And honestly, before this, I never heard about them. And then I start to dig in, and then probably the algorithm of Twitter start to push to my feed more and more of their videos. But then I start to see that they were delivering like 200 every time, 200, 220 drone per batch on different weeks. So that was quite sustained.
Yes, yes. Well, thank you so much for your observations. We're very proud of these drones. They this is why the most elite Ukrainian units, ask for them so much. They don't need, as you say, they don't need to be reworked like some drones sometimes need to be. They're not just bought from China and sent, without any kind of work. They're actually assembled, very, very carefully assembled with the very selected parts. And but I should say that the team is actually does consist of effectively what are volunteers. There's not a people on paid staff. Let's say they're people who are the team is reimbursed for living expenses. They have to live on something, but just at the most basic level. And it's also a nonprofit. It's a charitable fund registered in Kyiv, and so for all these reasons, the maximum amount of money that comes into the Wild Hornets goes out in the form of drones to destroy the invaders and keep Ukraine free. And because of some of the the mass production techniques that have been that you highlighted, we've been actually able to, and because of the scaling, the dramatic scaling we've achieved, we've been able to actually lower the cost of the drones from it used to be around $400 for a 7-inch drone to between $350 and $390 for one drone. And as well, the night capacity, we found ways of achieving that for a marginal additional cost, maybe $10 to $30 per drone to equip it with that capacity. As well, because of this constant innovation and very, very close interaction between the units, and these are, elite units. They're not generally, there are some units that aren't elite, obviously, that receive these drones, but many of them are some of the best known, units you've heard of in Ukraine, giving constant feedback. Because of that, we've been able to do all sorts of other innovations, harden them against electronic warfare, and now working toward artificial intelligence technology to allow target identification and designation, striking a pilot designated target. So those are things that are coming and are well under development right now. And I should say also, for the scaling that I mentioned, is pretty incredible. When I started with just knowing about the Wild Hornets, just before that in May, that's when they were able to produce 35 drones in a month. And that rose to 700 in December. And from then, it actually almost doubled to 1,300 in January. And we're already on track to very likely beat that in February. There's just over 1,000, I believe, have been produced in February so far. So it looks like we probably build more than 1,300 by the end of the month. So a really dramatic increase. And I should say it's all donation funded. There's no contracts from the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense. Most of the large Ukrainian charitable funds have not donated. These are like small donors, mostly in Ukraine, but that's grown dramatically. And so as the international knowledge of wild hornets has grown, so have donations from around the world as well. So that's quite exciting to see as well.
Yeah, another thing that is quite exciting to see is your graph of your plot about the drone production, and then I mean thinking of superimposing the FPV usage that we tracked using the data from Andrew Perpetua, and they match so well. Like the nearly doubling, and then yeah, I mean these progressions show also a very impressive scalability, which I saw also in a recent video about the acquiring the acquisition of a pick and place machine, which of course doesn't come as just the machine. There is a lot of training needed, but also engineer dedicated to design the PCB, design the software, because this is a question that I would like to ask you, if you can reply, of course, on this. Is the software proprietary? So, I mean, you are developing your own software without regards of AI, but in general, you are designing also the software, or you are for now using some kind of open source or other type of software for navigation, control of the drone, etc.
That I'm not at liberty to talk about some kinds of details like that, and also the manufacturing, the specifics of manufacturing specific components is something that we aren't able to talk about right now. Unfortunately, I'm sorry. I know
Oh,
that
no worries.
there have been some videos posted on our various pages showing, right there you go, showing some manufacturing, but we can't confirm what exactly, who's making what and where that's being made. There's as you know very well, there's a very, very difficult security situation, particularly with any kind of military production in Ukraine.
No, absolutely. In fact, thank you for your transparency. And one thing that I want to highlight to our listener is that if you design your own board, it's very likely that these guys are doing a hell of a work in order to verify that each design is consistent and can be upgraded. And also, I guess that you are also adopting a lot of quality standard in order to be sure that, for example, if you discover that there is a bug or an imperfection in your design, you can go back, look which model had that, and then improve. So I really see a professional work here rather than a volunteer organization. So hats off to all the work that you all are doing at the moment.
Thank you so much. And Will, Ukrainian troops deserve to have the highest quality equipment, and so partly because that isn't being in adequate quantities by our allies. In some cases, of course, yes, it is being, but obviously with the United States, whose support is critical for Ukraine, that's not the case. And so we need to provide the best kind of equipment possible to save Ukrainian lives. And in fact, we get stories about that all the time, every day. We're hearing stories. In fact, just before this call, I was in touch with our team, and one of our most highly decorated pilots and his comrades were involved in destroying a vast quantity of Russian equipment on the southern front near Orozhaine. And so one of the videos, I think there's a new video on the Wild Hornets Twitter page that shows some of that, and it's quite amazing. Oh, this is all just in one day that this happened. And what's one of the other interesting things about this is that when we get frustrated by the lack of support from the United States, for example, and we see the urgent needs in Ukraine, we can press our representatives to do more, but we can actually also support in such a direct and immediate way. There's been we've had raffles, for example. We just finished a raffle a week ago, and 2 days after that raffle was done, some of the parts that were funded by that raffle were actually in drones that had been already delivered to the 3rd Assault Brigade at Avdiivka, where they used those drones to help save Ukrainian lives. And so this is happens again and again. Right now, there's also fundraising being done for the Da Vinci 1st Assault Brigade, and within 3 days of a call for funds that happened on Friday, they already had their first 20 drones that were funded by that call for donations. So this is the kind of gratifying result that I think people are excited to have, and attract so much interest and love for these what these guys are doing in Kyiv, and the units that they support.
Yeah, I remember really the when you delivered I think it's that the day that I DM'd you, because about the 200 drone to the 3rd Assault Brigade was just a week or few days before they went to Avdiivka.
Mm-hmm.
And when I saw that, I really felt that like there was something boiling on, because if you acquire so many drones so quickly, you must been up to something. And in fact, then Forbes, and then after a day after Forbes released that information about them going to Avdiivka, they were there essentially. So
Yeah.
I think is not unique, but I think is a feature of this type of weapon system, because let's say that they are not simple, but they can be easily manufactured once you have a very good process on, to the point that you can produce on demand. So I need 200 tomorrow, and if you have all the parts and you have enough material in stock, you can essentially assemble them with a good standard and send. But a question I want to ask you is, are you planning, is Wild Hornet? Oh, there was a question, yeah. Where the name Wild Hornets come from? If you,
No, I don't think it's that. It's I think it's from the sound that they make when they fly around. If you've heard what an FPV drone sounds like, I don't know. Do you have a video of?
I can probably find
Yeah,
that.
I can send you one too. But they're they sound like an angry hornet. Like Deki in Ukrainian kind of means wild, but it also means kind of like a savage or crazy. So I think that's where the name comes from. But yes, you're making a good point about the parts. This is one of the other things that's actually quite cool, is that the Wild Hornets have been, until recently, quite reliant on parts from China or not in Ukraine. And there have been, logistical issues, obviously, and there's a bit of a parts sourcing war happening with, obviously, the enemy is trying to get the same parts oftentimes. But we've been developing more and more sort of a made in Ukraine FPV drone. So increasingly, the parts are already or will soon be made in Ukraine, to the point where in March we're figuring that about 70% of the Wild Hornet will be built in Ukraine, and that should increase to 80 or 90% later this year. So that will increase the reliability of the supply, the speed of the sourcing of parts, and really the only limitation is the amount of donations. The more donations, there's no ceiling to how many drones, within reason, obviously, but there isn't a realistic ceiling right now. The only thing we're limited by is donations. More volunteers can be found, and for much of the assembly can be done by people who don't need an enormous amount of training. And so the number of drones we're hoping actually to be able to build 5,000 to 10,000 drones a month at some point later this year. So, but that requires donations, and that's something that we're working on as well. There may be a point in time when we get Ministry of Defense certification to get more funding for drones, and also we're exploring various collaborations with other partners inside Ukraine and outside Ukraine that we're either open to or are already being discussed.
I'm gonna try and play this with sound. I don't know if it works. I guess this is the sound you were talking about, right?
Well, let me think here. I'm going to send you something maybe a little more louder than that.
Okay.
That's not bad, but let me find a good one here. Hold on.
But this is essentially this is where the origins of FPV drones is coming from. This freestyle acrobatic sport, basically. Like the people compete with these things, and I think that's I don't know if everyone knows where this actually is coming from.
Yes, these FPV drones were before Ukraine sort of made them kind of famous. They were used for racing. They can go up to 150 kilometers an hour, and so here, hold on. I think I have one here. I'll play the sound for you, if you can just hear this. Just 1 second. If it plays properly.
Oh yeah.
Can you hear that?
Yep.
It sort of sounds like an angry hornet.
Yep. I understand.
And
Yep.
for me, that I'm terrified by anything like that, oh my gosh.
You can imagine, when you know that these things explode and can blow you into oblivion, basically, and you hear that sound, and if you don't know you are, operating drones in your area or someone in your team, it must be absolutely terrifying. I've seen videos of Russian soldiers being basically, herded like sheep into a field by an FPV drone.
Yes. That actually was. It may not be the same video you're talking about, but
It's the same. It's a Wild Hornet one. Yes.
Right. Yes, it's a Wild Hornet, a night drone Wild Hornet, that was being used actually by the same unit as the one that was involved in today's destruction of all this equipment, which I believe I'm estimating was worth about $7 million. By the way, it was destroyed with $7,000 worth of drones, about 20 drones. So that's 1,000 to 1 return on the donors' wise investment in Ukraine's freedom and really the freedom of the whole world from Russia's terrorist empire. So yes, in that particular case, what happened was there was a very large armored assault in the same area, Urozhaine, and a number of Russian hardware units were destroyed. But in this case, what happened? This was this is the cool thing about Wild Hornets is they can also be used in bomber mode. So the bomb was dropped, and then I think it looks like there were around 10 survivors of the enemy. And it's quite amazing to see the pilot just chasing. You see that little white little thing flying around? That's the FPV drone literally chasing them across this open field, and he just zips around overhead. When I saw that video, I couldn't believe it. I was just so amazed and impressed by this pilot and the effectiveness of this drone. I mean, it's like an Oscar performance, I think, I have to say. And we're going to remember these pilots. It's not exactly the same as the Battle of Britain, but we'll remember them, I think, as the few who helped save Ukraine, just like those pilots saved Britain.
Yeah, I don't know if you can see, that's the little white dot there. That's the heat signature from the FPV drone, and that little thing chased these soldiers in terror out on the field. And if you notice all these black spots, that's artillery strikes and mortar strikes. So they're essentially running into the it's I mean, if Ukraine had enough artillery ammunition,
Yeah.
that's a problem. But yeah, the terror this thing puts into soldiers, and I want to say, as a former army soldier myself, I hate FPV drones. Just the thought of them, because it makes me feel like all of the stuff that we learned is kind of obsolete and useless, at least in this sort of scenario, of course.
Well, it's there are a couple of points from what you said. If we had artillery, would this still be needed? And yes, actually, do you know Forbes, Volodymyr Dasenko, who's a reporter from Forbes, did a very interesting analysis, and he found that of all the different munitions that could be employed, the FPV drones were by far the most cost effective. And I think that the return for FPV drones that he calculated for armor was 175 to 1. So for every dollar of the cost of the FPV drone, it could destroy on average $175 of enemy equipment, and that includes the FPV drones that don't successfully strike the target. And so that was also 30 times more cost effective than, up to 30 times more cost effective than various types of artillery or mortars that he listed. And the same kind of cost effectiveness for even targeting personnel. You may think, well, why would we waste an FPV drone on an individual soldier? But it takes a lot of money to equip, train, feed, compensate a soldier, including if they're killed, compensation, or wounded, to treat them, and so on. So even for that, there's a massive cost effectiveness superiority for FPV drones. There was an opinion piece in I believe it was the Washington Post by a former senior executive in the U.S. Navy that said that without drones, and he was, I believe, including recon and artillery FPV drone. Actually, I think he was just referring to recon drones. Ukraine would need 3 to 4 times more shells. And that's just talking about recon drones. That's not even including the power, the effectiveness of FPV drones, which you guys, I know Andrew Perpetua's tables sometimes find that 70, 80, 90% of the identified strikes per day are from FPV drones.
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize also that CJ, one of the people in Tochnyi that we work with, he also emphasized that that there is, of course, also a tactic developing utilizing surveillance drones, FPV drones, and artillery or mortar munitions in combination. And that, in my eyes, if they had enough artillery support here, all these Russian troops would have been gone. Um, and yeah, it makes me really, really terrified to stuff. But of course, the fact that you basically you gain intelligence with your munition is also a development that we. Of course, this was already something that was in the loop with loitering munition, etc. But with this kind of availability, I couldn't have imagined that this would be happening so fast.
Hmm. Well, we saw in Avdiivka exactly what you were talking about. In the initial months of assaults, the combination use of all the different vectors of destroying the enemy, including FPV drones. Obviously, recon drones are vital for that. Artillery, and so on. And anti-tank missiles. The combination is just it's just like being it's like a hornet swarm attacking you. You're done. But it's also part of the issue is that part of the reason Ukraine has been forced to go this route is not just because of a lack of ammunition, but also because NATO, as you're saying, NATO or implying NATO countries are not, really there yet. They have not. It's taken them a long time to understand the critical importance of drones, even of recon drones, let alone FPV drones. There's been lots of stories of Ukrainian soldiers going for training in NATO country and having to try to convince the instructors of the importance of drones and various other, various digital tools. That for Ukrainians are, it's just as important as a shovel and your rifle. And I think that that mentality has changed now. And we have the drone coalition that's now supporting Ukraine, but it shows that Ukraine is really a world leader in this, especially in the production of very high quality aerial drones, but also, as you know, sea drones and ground drones. And so the rest of the world can really learn from Ukraine, but also to help Ukraine, give Ukraine money. Ukraine has the smarts and the know-how, obviously the battlefield experience. We know how to apply this stuff and develop the best stuff, but obviously more money is needed. As I was mentioning, the Wild Hornets are the only bottleneck is money, donations from individuals, but also funds from governments. The Wild Hornets have destroyed at this point something like $330 million of Russian equipment since last August, I believe it is, and that's with about $1.5 million of donations. How much money does any NATO country have? Like, imagine that times 1,000. This is the kind of impact that that Ukraine could be having with just a little more help from our allies, and I think that is coming, but it's been very slow to come. And
Yep.
so NATO has a lot to learn from Ukraine.
Oh, absolutely. And you probably noticed that military institutions are not the fastest in adopting sometimes, and can be very conservative in their approach to institutionalize new capacities and stuff like that. And especially things like this. I mean, it's completely groundbreaking technology, and I think unfortunately, especially in many NATO countries, the reluctancy to jump onto these technologies that aren't necessarily intended for military use there's quite a big hesitancy for that. But I'm very happy to see that there are big announcements of big projects in Western allied countries that will produce drones and also FPV drones for Ukraine. I hope some of that will happen in Ukraine. I know that Alexander Kamishin was out, saying you should give us the money so we can build them because we know how to build them. So I hope that some of that money will go to Ukraine and the production in country. But at the same time, I'm happy that some of the production will happen in Europe, because, of course, it will diversify some of the logistics, and I think that for sustainability is probably good in the long run. But yeah, absolutely, most of this should be happening in Ukraine, and yeah, I just want to go back to this. I think it's such a beautiful video, and I think Daniele will. When I saw this, I was so happy, and
Yeah.
I know you can't talk about everything, but um, can we ask it like, is your goal to make the whole all the components in Ukraine, or at least in Europe? And maybe you can be a little bit general about Ukrainian drone production if you can.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
you
I
can
can
answer, of course.
Sure, sure, of course. Thank you for also understanding about the security. The goal is to make, as I was mentioning, 70% by March. We'll have 70% of the drone made in Ukraine, and later this year, 80 to 90%, and the remainder will be made in an allied country or allied countries, not in. So there won't be any reliance on, a less reliable partner. And that speeds, as I was mentioning, speeds delivery, reduces costs, and ensures that we have the highest quality parts that are, exactly what the Ukrainian units are, tell us that they need.
That's a
And
beautiful.
also, as just actually to add to that, sorry, it's that there's an industrialization of the process. So more and more of the process is automated, and that's another innovation that we're very proud of. So that's going to just speed it up and make it cheaper and more standardized, which is obviously critical, as you were mentioning.
Can I ask another question regarding batteries? I saw a picture or a couple of pictures about cell being soldered together. So essentially, you looks like that Wild Hornets is also capable of producing battery pack, and that if this is confirmed, I think is an incredible news, because essentially even the most difficult part to source, because everyone now needs polymer batteries or other kind of batteries. But this is something that you are doing now. If you can answer.
Yes. Well, again, no. I'm sorry. It's not possible for me to confirm that. But yes, any Ukraine is able to make the most complicated parts, and anything that Ukraine can't make will be available from an allied country, which is a more reliable supply.
Thank you very much. And again, sorry if sometimes we ask sensitive question, but as I said, don't worry, we understand it.
Thank you so much.
We also have a viewer question. I will try to get. There's a lot of comments in YouTube now, so in chat. So I don't know if we'll manage them all, but we'll try. So one here that is relevant is regarding supply from OMBB. How problematic was the dependency getting parts from China, and are there still dependencies in that direction? What is the most problematic to get? And I remember actually I saw a video where you were actually emphasizing this issue with Chinese New Year a few weeks ago.
Yes, yeah. I think that was that related to video transmitters, I believe.
Yes, that was related to
Yeah,
video transmitters.
those can sometimes be more tricky. In the past, they have been, but that's something that we're quickly solving.
But so let's turn back 6 months. Was this a lot larger problem than it is now?
I don't know. I didn't hear about it being a problem then, but I'm not 100% sure. It may have just been something I wasn't aware of. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, because I've heard at least some chatter, at least before Christmas, about people panicking a little bit about parts, maybe other manufacturers, etc. Because there was a lot of orders being placed, and there was some scarcity of certain parts.
Yeah, there has been in the past, and I think it goes up and down, or in terms of how dire the problem is. But there has been sort of a behind the scenes part supply war, behind the scenes of the drone war, let's say, in terms of getting as many parts as possible. It's hard to know sometimes, what the real story is of why parts aren't available, or are they available, and so on. But yeah, that has been an issue in the past.
And I just wanted to say also that there were many of the questions that have been in chat have we kind of addressed them, so I'm not going to pull them up. But I just want to recognize that Kellen asked, are most of the FPV components made in Ukraine? Yeah, so well, you answered that. I'm sorry I didn't pull up the question when you were talking about this. Yeah, well, I wanted to talk a little bit about EW, and you mentioned that you're building drones that are EW hardened. And I guess this is also a little bit of a sensitive topic, but you indicated a video to me, so maybe you can explain what happens there.
Yes, I believe this was special forces, the Ukrainian special forces unit, if I'm remembering correctly. If this was the one from a few days ago, and yes, so it was able to strike the an enemy electronic warfare installation, despite the presence of that counter drone system there. So we're developing drones to be able to counter that Russian measure.
And has this been reported as a huge issue for you? I know some drone units have been struggling in certain areas with EW.
Yes, certainly. Certainly, the enemy is publicly known to have very strong EW capabilities, and so that's what I have heard. Also, that has been an issue in some sectors, or perhaps with certain kinds of drones. I'm not sure which particular drones are an issue there, but we have for some time now had that capacity to be able to counter that. So I think the first strike that I saw was still last fall, involving a wild hornet with a sort of an EW resistance, or being hardened against EW.
I also wanted to show this video, which is yeah. So the question I have in relation to this video is more about pilot training, um, and because here in this video there are several more or less acrobatic moves being performed in order to strike into trenches, which is also something Daniele is doing research on now. And this is one of the reasons why we see that trench warfare has to change as well, because this is not just happening from Ukrainian units towards Russian positions. The Russians were actually the ones who started striking positions heavily with FPV drones. And we see that this is going to be just more and more difficult on the front lines. Operating in trenches is going to be very, very hard. These are actually dropping munitions, as far as I see, but what they do is destroying the fortifications, and this way the soldiers in the trenches, they lose their cover, and next time the drone comes in, they are exposed. So this is a huge problem for Ukraine as well. But pilot training. how long does it take to train a pilot to an efficient level? Can you say something to that?
Yes, just about the videos there. As you pointed out, these are Wild Hornets being used in bomber capacity, which is one of the unique things about Wild Hornets. It's not the only drone in Ukraine that has that capacity, but it's one of the things that really stands out. It reminds me of another armored attack that actually one of the pilots involved in today's, the main pilot, I believe, involved in today's destruction of the Russian equipment was also involved in an attack in the same sector last summer, where a very small, outnumbered, outgunned Ukrainian unit from the Presidential Brigade was under a large armored attack. I believe there were 10 tanks and armored vehicles attacking them. They had 5 drones, 5 Wild Hornets, and a couple of at least 2 Wild Hornet pilots were using those 5 Wild Hornets for an entire day to repel 17 different attacks that happened during the course of that day. And at the end of the day, I understand that most of that armor was destroyed or damaged, and the survivors of the Russian attack had to withdraw. And one of the pilots, whose call sign is Hulk, was awarded the Golden Cross by Commander-in-Chief General Zaluzhny. So it's just a proud moment, and it just reminds me a little bit of the amazing potential of these drones being used in bomber mode, not in the better known kamikaze mode. So, but that goes to your question actually, because that's not an easy skill. FPV drones are not as easy to fly as the better sort of better known or previously better known Mavics, for example, which are used in sometimes in bomber capacity or often in recon capacity. So it takes quite a bit of skill, and I understand several weeks of training. So there's quite a rigorous training process to be able to do these things. It may seem like just simple, they're just dropping a bomb. That's very, very hard to do, and so you're seeing some brilliant piloting at work there when you see these strikes.
I know there are drone schools being formed, and also there is a special drone branch happening right now. Do you expect the capabilities and the skill level to be enhanced a lot in the time coming?
Yes, we're really, as amazing as it might sound, we're just at the beginning of this revolution. The President Zelensky talked not long ago about 1 million, produced in Ukraine FPV drones by the end of this year, and that's certainly not an unrealistic goal. In fact, it's very possible that many more than that could, not many times more than that, but much more than that could be produced. It's certainly reasonable, So the development of the separate drone branch is just a part of that process. I believe it will just help to institutionalize the training. It'll help to institutionalize these units within the armed forces, and obviously improve attention, training, and so on. Yes, we're going to just see more and more of these pilots and even drone engineers. Now there's an NGO, Ukrainian NGO, that Victory Drones, that has sponsored a free online course. It's only available in Ukrainian, unfortunately, but perhaps later they may add other languages. But it's thousands of Ukrainians have signed up for it, and we're becoming a nation of drone engineers. You can just build your own drone in your bedroom if you want after doing that course. And I understand that just within a short time after announcing that, I think it was last month, already there were, within a few days, there were already 100 drones produced by people who had already been in the course. I think the course had already existed for a short time. And 80% of them were at military standards. So these were drones made by people who took an online free course and were making, military grade stuff that they from parts they bought on the internet.
Amazing. It's all amazing. Daniele, do you have any questions before we start picking off all the questions from chat here?
Yeah, no, yeah, it's amazing to listen and understand how this development is happening essentially in real time, because this is one of the few occasion in modern history where you see a weapon system being developed by both sides, but essentially at this space is incredible. One question that I would like to ask you is: there is any plan to being involved in more institutional funding program from the government, because there are some money coming from the West. For example, one very well known is the 200 million pound given by the UK government specifically for drone and FPV drone program. So as we say, that there is a possibility that a larger amount of money will be available on the table. There is any plan on moving this, and if there is any plan, which is the barrier at the moment that stop you from doing this?
Yes, well, that until now, the Wild Hornets has been funded solely by donations, mostly I understand from small individual donors. Very in the last month or two, that has as the awareness has increased and the effectiveness has been become more widely publicized. Some of the their funds, some larger funds and very large donors have come on board. For example, the Stenenenko Fund, which funds a lot of drones for Ukrainian forces, also donated large amounts of money to the Wild Hornets to fund drones. So this was an amazing development, and very, very appreciated. And as well, one of the deputies of the Ukrainian Parliament, Marian Zablodsky, worked with a very generous U.S. donor to fund a very large number of drones as well. Actually, some of those drones that you were showing, some of those strikes by the it said Ludwig on the drone, those were particularly funded by that donor and through that deputy. So and the reason for sticking mostly with that kind of donation is that it's been allowed the Wild Hornets to be more flexible, to deal directly with the most effective units that are able to use these drones, to destroy as much of the enemy as possible. And just to react very quickly, for example, in situations like Avdiivka or Urozhaine, where there's been this series of epically failing Russian attacks, we're able to quickly, within even hours, send them more drones just as they're needed, to ensure that they have enough to keep burning the enemy. And so that, however, now as we want to scale and continue to just really expand the production as quickly as possible, we're exploring that a little bit to get the Ministry of Defense certification, so that we can work with the Ministry of Defense and get contracted to supply them directly. And so that is certainly something for that scaling reason that's being explored.
Thank you very much for this clarification. And another question that I would like to ask you is regarding some particular aspect on the Warhead. At the moment, we know that most of the Warhead, at least most, are essentially made from other ammunition, but there is a converging trend that essentially for both safety and reliability, would like to have these munition to be developed specifically for FPV drone, because of course arming these is quite a dangerous task. We know that have been accident in the past, not with your drone but with other drones as well. So are you moving also on this side, and how much the assistance from military is important? You don't have to go on the detail on what actually is going to be developed, just in general.
I just wanted to say that this to me looks like a purposely made munition. Um, can this be confirmed?
No, I'm sorry, I can't talk about anything specific like that. But I will say that the units we work with are, I mean, these are like, we're talking like the HUR, the Military Intelligence Special Forces, the SBU, a Special Operations Center, Military Counterintelligence, you know, the Bulava, which we've talked about, you know, elite pilots. These guys are, you know, are sort of craftsmen of what they do. They're professionals, and so they have their own, you know, just like any craftsperson has their own love of exactly the right thing for their job, and so they are, you know, developing certain things of their own, and but you know, of course, a greater standardization and mass production of drone munitions is certainly needed and is happening as well. So it's sort of, I believe that the answer is sort of on those two levels. You know, the units are innovating themselves, you know, being the professionals and you know, needing to have this stuff ready made and made to their own specifications, and as well the government is doing this as well. And there's another way that I think that Wild Hornets stand out is that because of this unique collaboration we have with these elite units, we're able to customize the drones to their exact specifications and their needs in particular sectors. And without giving any details about what customization there is, but you know, but you could imagine. I mean, simple things I can reveal are the range, for example, can be adapted, or payload capacity. You know, things like that can be adapted to what a particular unit wants.
Yeah, I would love to talk for ages about different, you know, radio transmitter, etc. But I think that we're gonna focus on some other stuff now. There are so many questions we need to try and address as well, and I really like this question from Callan. How difficult is it for commercial drone businesses to scale up production in Ukraine, and are there tax reliefs or other government incentives for small businesses to develop drones? Now, you're not a business in that sense. You don't sell your drones. You're an
Right.
NGO, right?
Yes. So we give the drones for free to units. They're not sold. I know. I mean, I understand that sometimes I won't even comment on how it works with other drones. Really, it's not my place. But our drones are given to the units for free. They don't have to pay anything, but I do know that the scaling of production is happening at a dramatic pace in Ukraine. You know, 1 million FPV drones for this year is the minimum target, and so and not unrealistic as well. And most of that will, I believe, be done by Ukrainian businesses, as far as I understand. So the demand from the business sector has already been massive and is actually just going to accelerate right now. And so I do understand that I don't know about tax relief particularly, but I know that there are, you know, very strong government incentives for businesses to develop drones right now in Ukraine.
Okay, I know Daniele wants to show a PDF, but let's go through some of the questions before we go to that. So this one you kind of mentioned. Do you know if Ukraine is close to introducing AI-assisted FPVs to the battlefield? I think they're already there. Maybe I've heard something, but you talked about that you are also working on this, right?
Yes.
Yep. It's also one of the things I absolutely hate, but I'm very happy Ukraine gets it.
Well,
Good.
we should clarify. It's not Skynet. We're not talking about Terminator here. Um,
Yeah,
so
it's
it's
machine learning. It's
it's
actually I don't like the word AI in this sense. It's a target identification with video recognition, right? No,
well,
no?
I'm loath to give too much detail, but yes,
Yeah,
more or less something like that.
yeah.
And it's not something that somebody would just send a drone into the air and let it go and kill whatever it wants to kill. That doesn't happen like that.
Yeah. Okay. Good to hear. And it's not that I hate it because you are doing it. I just hate it thinking as a soldier facing this threat. You know, because
Yeah.
that's I need to think like this in a way. It's a mechanism in the back,
Well,
in my bone marrow.
if I I can't even imagine putting myself in the mind of the enemy. It's just such a loathsome concept to me even to think about it. But if someone was to do that, they'd be terrified, and they should be. So get the hell out of Ukraine.
Oh, absolutely, yes. I know. This is so freaking terrifying, and Ukraine is gonna have so many more drones within this, the end of the spring. If we, at least, looking at the predictions from Daniele, who's been doing a lot of the, tracking of the documented strikes, and the trends there just point in one direction upwards. And yeah, the invaders should be terrified.
And I actually, going back to one of the things you talked about earlier was the breakdowns of the data that you guys have so amazingly assembled, which is such an amazing and vital historical record for this for the war. And what's gratifying actually in one of your last pieces of data on this was to see how Ukraine, despite its being under this massive attack, despite the the funding difficulties with the United States and so on, has maintained its very significant lead over a country that's massively bigger, has a massively bigger industrial capacity for the vehicle strikes. I mean, not just vehicle, but the armored equipment strikes and other hardware strikes. And that shows I think that speaks to the quality of Ukrainian drones over the Russian ones, which I understand are just not as good quality. And so we also see that Ukraine, in that chart you're showing now, has jumped to the lead in strikes on infantry. And your other chart showing strikes on positions shows that Ukraine has almost caught up, and that's in a very short time span. So we're holding our own and leading on in that data, which is very gratifying to see.
Yeah. The data has been the very first time I started was just for curiosity, but and to try to combat the propaganda from the Kremlin that was saying, "Oh, we have 6 times the drone that are currently produced by Ukraine." And honestly, by seeing the data from Andrew, I was thinking, oh, that's not possible, because this is ammunition that should cost very few money. If you have so much, you should bomb the heck out from your enemy. You would use as many as you can. Uh, Instead, the picture that came out was at the beginning, especially in December, was a kind of parity in some areas and some advantages in vehicle strikes and in position strike for one side to the other. But then slowly we've seen an improvement, especially here in position. Now you can see that, of course, this is what we can see. We know that the strikes that we publish are only a part of those, because of not because there is this misconception of, oh, they are retaining these for OPSEC maybe some of these for OPSEC, maybe, but most of the time the reason is much easier. in order to cut all the video, do the nice editing, and you may know because you do as well, you need time. You need people doing this, and for units, it's not sometimes humanly possible to post process all these videos. So you just have to select maybe the most choreographic. And of course there is also a problem in terms of capability of the drone to the feedback maybe is very noisy, is terrible, so you ditch for that. So all in all, the data that we have give us a trend, and the trend is encouraging because for example the strike on vehicle is utterly fantastic. And of course people say, oh well, but the problem is that Ukraine is using less vehicle. But the Ukraine is using less vehicle because understood the threat, not because they have less. Oh, I mean, in absolute value, they have less at the moment. Probably not for a lot of time if the stats will continue like that. But they know about the threat, and so they use very wisely their mechanized infantry because they know that they could be hit as well. But the Russians do not care, and then they continue to use their vehicle on en masse. But the strike on position has been game changing because we seen a distinct increase in strikes in months, to the point that at the start of February, Ukraine was in advance for a week, and then of
Mm.
course, now we had this race, let's say. But now I'm working mainly on this side of the topic, so strike on trenches, and we discussed about this. But in general, the trends are good. But as you say, the most important things is keep advancing, not saying, oh, okay, it's done. It's done once the war is over. So I totally welcome initiative like Wild Hornets, especially because I see a lot of improvement also, and you try always to improve your product, despite it's not a product, it's something that you produce, not for a profit, let's say, but your profit is the freedom. So it probably is a more important outcome rather than a dividend.
Yes,
So sorry
that's
for
very
my
very well said. Thank you. Yes, that's exactly right. I would add that sometimes you're exactly right. Sometimes the units just, or the volunteers involved, or whoever is reporting the strikes just doesn't have the time. Can't report. Sometimes it's just the quality of the video is a little not exactly what it can be published. It's just grainy or something like that. There's sometimes security issues as well to publishing certain strikes. And so there can be any number of reasons. But one thing though that we do hear is that in many sectors, and I've heard this quite consistently, is that the number of drones seen flying around in the air on both sides is almost identical, one-on-one. So it's important to realize that you have some favorable data there, but Russia is mass producing these drones and also innovating, and so we have to stay ahead of them, and we can do that only by receiving donations. In the case of groups like the Wild Hornets and also the allies who have to support Ukraine. It's critical. And so that's where the United States and its inaction in the last several months is so grating and so frustrating for Ukrainians to see. When it's costing lives, and it's costing places like Avdiivka may not have been lost if there was enough munitions. And FPV drones are quite obviously are vital on the battlefield now. But one thing is that you have to consider their range as well. FPV drones, Wild Hornets I think the longest strike that I know of is 22 kilometers away from the pilot. The strikes that actually you were showing that are from today around Urozhaine were over 10 kilometers distant from the pilot. So there has been a misnomer that FPV drones have an operational effectiveness maybe 4 or 5 kilometers, and that's not the case. But still, 22 kilometers is the outside limit, and so beyond that is where Ukraine needs the munitions that are being held up so frustratingly by the United States. And so artillery and longer range strikes are still vital for Ukraine to be able to defeat Russia and save lives.
Yeah, I'm just showing 22 kilometers on the map here, and you see you can actually reach quite far. You can cover an operational area pretty well. Um, I know that this, the ranges is not necessarily in an absolute, because it needs to take into account terrain and buildings and obstacles, etc. So um, there are different systems that can handle these things, but it's still a challenge for a radio signal to go through building, forests, and nature in general.
Mm-hmm.
So but yeah, 22 kilometers maximum strike. It's actually a very good achievement. I think that's the longest I've heard of from a normal FPV drone.
Mm. Yeah, I haven't heard of one longer than that, and that was, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was a howitzer. So well worth the trip.
Oh yes, absolutely. Daniele, you wanted to talk a little bit about something I know how, like, I cannot explain it, but you can.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that is very interesting that has been coming out under the, I mean, a lot of researchers has been working on using a different type of technique to create conical shape that are used in shape charge. Now, yeah, that thing, the image on the right, which are at the pinnacle on how you create a high velocity stream of molten material that normally is used to pierce through an armored vehicle or a target in general. Now, the shape is very important, and there have been a lot of studies in engineering and science in order to understand the best shape, the best characteristic for a shape charge. And of course, the limit was the manufacturing process. And but recent in 2000, around 2000 and also 8. 3D printing started to do its first baby step, but there were a lot of research in 2011, 2019. This paper is from 2019, and this is a completely university-based research program, where they design and 3D print a metal conical shape charge, uh, and they tested these across different targets. And they compare these with a traditional CNC machined uh, shape charge. And the results, which are shown at the very end in the appendix, just because I don't want to overflow the conversation, is quite uh, remarkable, because what they demonstrated was that with the similar design, which is not ideal, because why you would like to use 3D printing, which is, you want to use 3D printing because then you can push a little bit ahead the shape and how the shape can be changed in order to obtain the maximum damage, but also try to limit the effect of those type of defense system that try to um, allow the explosion of the warhead much before it arrives to a range where the plume of molten material can actually penetrate the armor. Essentially, you have been seen in Afghanistan, but now also in Ukraine, these cages around the tank. They are essentially prepared and installed to avoid this, to increase the distance between the shape charge and the vehicle. And essentially, they obtain with a very simple design, more or less, in some cases, even better performances of CNC machine, the shape charge. Now, why I'm taking these ahead? Look at the dimension and look at how they activated this. This is essentially electrically driven. And this is amazing because one of the things is that you can optimize the shape of the conical shape in order to house more explosive and reach essentially higher speeds without compromise too much the dimension and the weight. And so I wouldn't be that surprised if in a era where we see in 3D printing on with plastic being so important for the development of FPV drones, let's start to see also metal 3D printing for 3D printing shape charges for FPV drone or for other type of attack drones. And I think this is a very interesting development that I'm sure other people are at the moment exploring. I'm not going to ask you if it's the case or not because I don't want to ask you these questions, so you don't have it. But it was just a nice things to bring up to make understanding the level of innovation and the amount of um, things that are going to be on the battlefield in a such short period of time. So that's it. Sorry.
Well, no, it's very interesting. It just shows, I think, exactly what we're talking about the dramatic innovation. And actually, I can confirm to you that that exactly is being done, including, understand with, I've just communicated with my colleagues in Kyiv, and they say that it's okay to actually reveal this, that that is exactly being done. Not by the Wild Hornets particularly themselves, but in Ukraine.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And my personal congratulations to whoever worked on that project.
Yeah, so some people are pinging me, by the way, because they want to know where they can go and find out, more about Wild Hornets, if there's any web resources and places to donate. Especially has been asked, in DMs to me now and in the comments.
Yes. Well, do you have a screenshot you could put of the Wild Hornets Twitter page? It's unfortunately not. It's not called Wild Hornets. It's called. Probably that was already taken at the time that they created the Twitter page, but it's there. It is at the top. It says Diki Sheshny, which means Wild Hornets in the image, and then it's spelled will end Hornets. You can consider that to be will end the Russian terrorist empire, but with only one L. And so that's one place that has all the donation information. At the very top in the bio is the PayPal account where donations can be sent as well. There's a Telegram page. There's a website that's actually spelled exactly as the it's right there also linked at the top. So that's in Ukrainian, but you can use Google Translate to translate into English. That's on our to-do list to make that an English website. There's a very popular Instagram page actually that has, I think, 9,000 followers. And we're also on TikTok. So there's lots of places to see Wild Hornets blowing up the enemy, and exactly how donations are being turned into that freedom-loving drone.
I think I need to get myself a Wild Hornets fella. Because your logo is very cool, and also your drones look very cool.
We actually, it's funny that you say that, because we had a fundraiser in January where we offered to. Normally speaking, you can actually you can name a Wild Hornet, you can sponsor Wild Hornet and have your name on it for $350, $350 donation US. And but we reduced the price to $100 for a short time to raise funds for some needed drone parts. And so those, so I think there were 170 different named drones. I believe we raised $25,000 during that period of time. And so now those pictures are all coming. They've finally been made. It's not that it takes normally wild hornets that long to be made, but there's a lot of time that the volunteers needed to take to put stickers on drones and and photograph them in nice in a sort of nice setting. So those have just started to go to the various donor. You can see them on on Twitter now, and so if you want your name on a drone or your special words of wisdom to the enemy, you're very welcome to have that. And on my Twitter page, there's a few of those are there as well. My Twitter page is called Armed Maidan, which is Maidan is the place where the Revolution of Dignity happened 20 years ago, actually. As of 2 days from now, the victory of the Revolution of Dignity, the Maidan Revolution, happened 20 years ago, actually, as of 2 days from now. So that's an important a date. And tomorrow, I should say, is the day of the memory of the Heavenly 100 heroes who died on that day 20 years ago, February the 20th, a very, very important date for Ukrainians, people who sacrificed, unarmed protesters fighting the pro-Russian regime that in many ways, brought us, helped bring us to where we are today, for this fight for freedom that Ukraine has been really waging for 350 years against the Russian Empire and its genocides and and killing and all sorts of horrible things that we're trying to get away from right now. So these are it's very important to remember these people who sacrificed so much so that Ukraine could have what it has now.
Thank you for letting us know and reminding us of that. I just wanted to because Andrew told me about this story today, and I know this is of course not your drone, so I'm sorry about that. But I think it says something about how high of a status the FPV drones or drones in general has has within the Ukrainian population. So this is a mother that lost her son in the picture, and if I can you read the Ukrainian, by the way?
Yes. I'm just trying to see it. I can't see it very well.
I can probably make it larger.
Oh, yes, thank you. Okay.
So as far as I understood, she lost her son and she invested all her savings into basically donating drones to the Ukrainian armed forces. And it's really moving, I also saw another very moving video today of a Ukrainian father who was volunteering that United 24 shared today of a Ukrainian father who's serving in the ZSU because he lost his son and now he wants to protect other sons and daughters of Ukraine.
Yes. It's so tragic. I mean, it's Ukraine has just had such a hard time for so long, and it's every Ukrainian family, or almost every Ukrainian family. I was just telling one of our I was talking about this with one of our dear volunteers, and almost every Ukrainian family has such tragedies in its past. Within just 1 or 2 or 3 generations. My mom was born at the very tail end of the Holodomor, the Holocaust of Ukraine, when we don't even know how many, it could be 10 million Ukrainians died because of Moscow, and the same things the same mentalities and attitudes that Moscow has today. This isn't new for Ukraine, and so I'm so sorry for this mother who lost her son, and it says there that he was in the I can't. It's part of it's cut off there. Yeah, he was in the border guards in the detachment from Donetsk, and he passed away the 9th of January in 2023 in the Soledar axis, and her name is Tatiana, and she donated for these drones 3 drones that she funded, and at the end it says, forever to remember the hero, and thank you to Tatiana. And this it's a very touching story, because we hear stories like this of children who raise funds at their school in their community to raise money for a drone. This just happened a few weeks ago. 2 pensioners, 60-year-old women who put their pennies together to raise funds for drones. This is the people who are supporting the Wild Hornets and other charities like United 24. Wild Hornets does get a lot of help from around the world, but about 85 to 90% of the money comes from Ukrainians, and there's no fatigue there. Ukrainians are not tired of this. They're tired of the war, but they're not tired of fighting. They're sick and tired of the war. They want nothing more than for it to end, but they will give everything to stop Russia from having this effect on their children and their grandchildren. Stanenko, who I mentioned before, Serhiy Stanenko, he has a large charity in Ukraine, and he did a fundraiser for FPV drones a week or two ago. I can't remember the exact amount, but I think it was at least $100,000 was the target. I think it was 2,000 drones, if I'm not mistaken. I'm sorry if I'm not remembering correctly, but he raised that in just a few days from Ukrainians. So Ukrainians are fighting hard, and the destruction from Russia just motivates us to fight harder.
Thank you very much. It's very emotional, this story, and there are so many of these stories, unfortunately. I need to emphasize something, because there's some comments in chat that Tochnyi, we do not take donations at all. We are only trying to relay information about the war in Ukraine and relevant information to the war in Ukraine. If you want to donate to Wild Hornets, then we put the link in the description so you can find their website. But yeah, I just want to make sure everyone understands that we are not fundraising at all, Tochnyi as a group.
And in case any of your followers don't know what Tochnyi means, it means exact. It means precision. And so I congratulate you and welcome you for your precise work that documents what Ukraine is doing, and as I say, is a vital part of the record to establish this. And it's not easy. I know it takes a lot of time, and so we commend you for what you do, and everyone who supports Ukraine, or the volunteers for the Wild Hornets around the world, the donors. It means everything to Ukrainians.
Thank you so much. Actually, you are the first ever guest, I think, that takes the name Tochnyi and explains it. We've been asked by many people what it means, and I was when we started, looking for a name for the group, etc. We asked several Ukrainians. We wanted to be very sure that this didn't sound wrong or meant something wrong, because we wanted this to mean exact and precise, because our goal as a group is to give exact and precise information to our best ability, of course.
Yes, thank you.
And thank you so much. I don't know if there is anything else you or Daniele want to say. I think we've been going for more than 1.5 hours, so we need to let you go here.
Yeah, I have a question, and maybe it's more of interest for the listener. So, can you explain how the drone are essentially how units can ask you for drone? How this process happen?
Yes, thank you for asking, because that is a question we get a lot. And right now, the units are welcome to contact me on Twitter by direct message, and then we'll figure out a secure way to discuss that, not on Twitter, obviously. And then, but there's also an email address that I believe is on that site that you have opened there. It should be there. No, that's the PayPal. Maybe I can. Oh, there it is. There it is. Yes. So there it is. hornetswild@gmail.com. And so you're welcome to, units are welcome to contact the Diki Shashni through that email address. And if there are any Ukrainian armed forces or other troops listening, дякуємо за вашу службу.
Thank you so much. I guess I need to do like a little wrap up. Yeah, we did 1.5 hours interview now with Alex from Wild Hornets. We normally stream every Sunday, but we also sometimes stream during the week. You can find our, please hit the subscribe button so that you will get notified when we do our streams and publish new videos, and share, so that we can relay this information to as many people as possible. And also check out our Twitter page, and we have also a lot of podcasts in the library, episodes on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So thank you again, Alex, so much for joining us in the stream. And Slava Ukraini.
Heroyam Slava. Thank you so much, and thank you to all who support us and our hardworking volunteers and Ukrainian soldiers defending freedom.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Дякую.
Прошу, дуже дякую вам.
On behalf of the brave.